The silence that followed my son's last word was not empty. It was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at his heart. But that came later. First, there was the build-up, the quiet hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to our lives for as long as I could remember. My name is Alara Vance, and for the past 8 years, since my son Leo was 2, I've been the sole captain of our small, often leaking ship. We live in Northwood Creek, a suburb so polished it squeaks. It's the kind of place where neighborhood covenants dictate the precise shade of beige for your mailbox. And the worth of a family is measured in the gleam of their late-model SUVs and the prestige of their children's extracurricular activities. I navigate this world like a ghost. By day, I am the woman who cleans the Northwood Public Library, my cart of disinfectants and gray rags gliding silently over floors that will soon be tread upon by the patent leather shoes of the children I see at Leo's school. I am invisible, a necessary function, like the plumbing or the electricity. By night, I trade my cleaning gloves for an apron at the Midnight Oil, a 24-hour diner off the interstate, where I pour coffee for long-haul truckers and listen to teenagers debate the meaning of life over greasy fries. It is an honest living. It keeps our small apartment, with its perpetually dripping faucet and view of a brick wall, from being just a dream. Most importantly, it allows me to take care of Leo. Leo is everything. He is 10 years old, a boy made of quiet observations and a heart too big for his narrow chest. He doesn't run with the packs of loud, athletic boys who dominate the school playground. He finds his universe in the pages of books and, more profoundly, in a battered, spiral-bound notebook he carries everywhere. In it, he writes poetry, not the rhyming, sing-song verses they teach in 4th grade, but something else entirely. His poems are raw, jagged little pieces of his soul. I've never told him I've read them. I find them sometimes left open on his desk when he's asleep. One I remember went, "The moon is a broken plate divided by God, dropped it on the sky divided by, and the stars are the crumbs divided by." He was too sad to sweep away. Reading it, I'd felt a pang so sharp it was almost pain. How did he know such things? When the flyer for the school's annual talent show came home, crumpled at the bottom of his backpack, I almost threw it away. Leo wasn't a performer. He wasn't a kid who craved the spotlight. But that evening, he flattened the paper on our small kitchen table, his finger tracing the words, "Talent Show." "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I want them to hear what I wrote." That phrase again, what I wrote. It wasn't a song, not a performance. It was a piece of him he wanted to give away. My heart clenched with a familiar mix of pride and terror. This town, these people, they weren't kind to things they didn't understand. They celebrated loudness, confidence that bordered on arrogance. Leo was a quiet melody in a world of clanging cymbals, but I saw the resolve in his eyes, a flicker of courage that I knew I couldn't extinguish with my own fear. "Okay, baby," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's do it." For weeks, he practiced. I'd come home from the library, smelling of bleach and industrial soap, to the sound of his soft voice reciting his chosen piece from behind his bedroom door. It was a poem about his father, a man he only knew from a single faded photograph. It was about absence, about a space at the dinner table that had never been filled. It was heartbreakingly beautiful. He didn't just tell a story, he painted a feeling. He asked me to help him pick an outfit. Something nice, Mom, but not like I'm trying too hard. We settled on his one pair of dark trousers, ironed to a crisp crease, and a button-down shirt I'd found on a clearance rack. He looked in the mirror, a small, serious man, and practiced his bow. The night of the show, the air in the school auditorium was thick with the scent of hairspray and parental ambition. The room buzzed with energy. Kids in sequin dance costumes and karate uniforms ran through the aisles, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Parents gathered in tight, chattering circles, comparing notes on summer camps and private tutors. I found us 2 seats in the middle of a long row, clutching my worn handbag in my lap, feeling the familiar sting of being an outsider. I was a single mom who cleaned their library, a waitress who served their kids after midnight. I did not belong in their club. When the announcer, a painfully cheerful PTA mom, called Leo's name, my breath hitched. He squeezed my hand once. A quick, trembling press. And then he was gone. Walking toward the stage, he moved slowly, his back straight, the worn notebook held carefully in his hands. He looked so small under the glare of the stage lights. He walked to the lone microphone at the center of the stage, adjusted it downward with a nervous tug, and opened his notebook. I could see his fingers shaking. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles white, and whispered to the empty space in front of me. "You've got this. Baby. Just tell them your story." It took a deep, shaky breath, looked out into the sea of faces, and began to speak. The first lines of his poem fell into the room like quiet snowflakes, delicate and almost invisible against the backdrop of noise. He spoke of a photograph on a dusty shelf, a man with his own eyes, but a stranger's smile. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that should have silenced the room. For a moment, it almost did. A few people in the front rows leaned forward, their expressions curious, but the spell was fragile, and it was quickly broken. The melody of his voice, soft and unearned, it couldn't compete with the culture of distraction. I watched it happen in slow motion, a tide of disrespect washing over my son. A man 2 rows ahead pulled out his phone, the bluish light illuminating his bored face as he scrolled. Someone behind me unwrapped a piece of candy with a loud, crinkling sound that made me flinch. Then the whispers started. A low, persistent hiss like static. They weren't listening. They weren't even pretending. They were waiting for the poetry to be over so the next act, a group of girls in matching neon outfits, could begin their high-energy dance routine. My pride curdled into a sick, helpless dread. And then I heard it. A voice, sharp and manicured, cutting through the general murmur. "That's the scholarship boy," it said, dripping with a kind of casual disdain. "The one whose mom cleans the library." I didn't have to turn around. I knew that voice. It belonged to Mrs. Albright, a woman whose son, Brandon, was the star of the school's soccer team. I recognized it from an afternoon a few months ago at the library. She had spilled her latte on the floor and, without looking at me, had simply snapped her fingers in my direction and said, "Clean this up," before turning back to her phone conversation. In that moment, I hadn't been a person to her. I had been a function, an extension of a mop, and now, she was doing the same thing to my son, reducing his entire being, his beautiful, fragile poem, to a label, a social status, a footnote in her world of privilege. Every muscle in my body went rigid. A hot, coppery rage flooded my veins, so potent it made my ears ring. I wanted to turn, to find her face in the crowd and unleash a torrent of words that would peel back her polished veneer and show everyone the ugliness underneath. I wanted to scream, "His name is Leo. He is more than your judgment. More than my jobs. More than the clothes we can afford." But my body was locked in a prison of my own making. My legs felt like concrete. My throat was sealed shut. What if I made a scene? They would just see me as the unhinged cleaning lady, confirming every prejudice they held. I would make it worse for him. That fear, the suffocating fear of a parent desperate to protect their child, paralyzed me. So I did nothing. I just sat there, my hands clenched into fists in my lap, my nails digging so deep into my palms that I felt the sharp sting of breaking skin. I was failing him. Right here. In this seat. I was failing him. On stage. Leo pressed on, his voice faltering slightly as if he could feel the waves of indifference crashing against him. He reached the final lines of his poem, about seeing his father's ghost in his own reflection. He delivered the last word, and it hung in the air. A final. Unanswered question. Then, silence. A profound, cavernous, deafening silence. No one coughed. No one moved. There was no polite, pitying applause. There was nothing. It was a vacuum. And it sucked all the light from my son's face. He stood there for 1 second. Then, too, I saw the hope in his eyes flicker and die. I saw his small shoulders slump in a gesture of utter defeat. He gave a yerky, almost imperceptible, bow to the silent room, then turned and walked quickly off the stage, disappearing into the shadows of the wings. My heart didn't just crack, it shattered. I was about to stand up, to follow him, to gather the broken pieces of my son and flee from this place forever, when I felt it a subtle shift in the room's energy. From the very back row, a man stood up. He was older, dressed in a simple, well-tailored suit that seemed out of place amidst the casual suburban attire. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't reacting at all. He just stood, his gaze fixed on the empty spot on the stage where Leo had been. Then, with a slow, deliberate pace, he began to walk down the central aisle. Murmurs erupted around me. "Who is that?" a woman whispered. The judges exchanged confused glances. The PTA mom fumbled with her microphone, ready to announce the next act. I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as the man continued his steady advance. But just as he reached the front section, the school principal, Mr. Davison, a man who lived by schedules and rules, stepped into the aisle, blocking his path with a polite but firm smile. "Mr." Davison held up a hand, his smile strained but resolute. "Sir, I'm afraid you can't be up here. We have a very tight schedule, and the next performers are waiting." He spoke with the practiced authority of a man used to managing chaos, but he had clearly never encountered a chaos quite like this. The man in the suit did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply met the principal's gaze and spoke with a calm that was more commanding than any shout. "With all due respect, Principal, the schedule is the least important thing happening in this room right now. An act of artistic courage just took place on this stage, and it was met with ignorance. That is a teachable moment, far more valuable than any dance routine." The principal blinked, momentarily flustered. The word artistic seemed to throw him off. This was a suburban talent show, a place for cute, harmless displays of effort, not art. He looked from the unwavering eyes of the stranger to the sea of curious faces in the audience, and some calculation must have told him that trying to stop this man would cause a bigger disruption than letting him speak. He gave a short, defeated nod and stepped aside. The man continued his journey to the stage, accepted the microphone from a wide-eyed student volunteer, and turned to face the crowd. The auditorium was utterly still. "Good evening," he began, his voice resonant and clear, filling the space that had so recently held only shame. "My name is Julian Croft." A few faint whispers rippled through the front rows. The name was not famous, but it held weight in certain circles. "I am a retired publisher and poet, and I came here tonight simply to watch my nephew in the school band. I did not expect to be moved. I did not expect to be reminded of why art matters." He paused, letting his words settle. "I have spent 40 years of my life reading submissions from the most celebrated writers in the country, sifting through mountains of words to find a single, honest voice. It is a rare and precious thing to find. And yet, tonight, I heard one. Rarely have I encountered a voice with the raw, unfiltered honesty that young man just shared with us." He looked toward the wings, where I knew Leo was hiding. He spoke of the moon as a broken plate. Think about that. Not just a light in the sky, but something shattered. Something beautiful in its imperfection. That is not a child's rhyme. That is the observation of a true poet. I could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting, the air crackling with a new kind of attention. People were leaning forward now, their faces no longer bored but intrigued. He had not just defended Leo, he had given them the language to understand him. What you just ignored was not a failure. Mr. Croft continued, his voice rising with a quiet passion. It was a gift. That was a voice. That was art. He then turned fully toward the side of the stage. Leo, he called out, his voice softening. Leo Vance, would you do us the honor of coming back out here for a moment? I felt Leo shrink behind the heavy velvet curtain. I knelt down, my hands on his trembling shoulders. It sees you, baby, I whispered, my own voice choked with tears. He really sees you. Go on. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a dawning, fragile hope. He took a deep breath and walked back into the light. Mr. Croft smiled kindly. I won't ask you to read the entire piece again, he said gently, but would you be willing to share just that first stanza with us one more time? This time, I believe we're all ready to listen. Leo nodded. A small, Yarky movement. Mr. Croft stepped back, standing a few feet behind him. A silent, unmovable guardian, Leo approached the microphone, his hands no longer shaking. He took a breath and began to read again. The same words, the same soft voice. But this time, they landed in a room that had been prepared to receive them. The silence was not empty. It was full of reverence. Every person in that auditorium was holding their breath, hanging on his every syllable. When he finished, for a beat, the perfect stillness remained. It was a silence of awe, not apathy. Then, one person began to clap. Mr. Croft. His solitary applause was the first stone in an avalanche. A second later, the entire auditorium erupted. It wasn't polite clapping. It was a roar, a wave of sound that washed over the stage. Filled with cheers and whistles, people surged to their feet. Their faces transformed. I saw one of the judges, the man who had been typing on his phone, wiping a tear from his eye, and I saw Mrs. Parton, Albright, standing and clapping along with everyone else. Her face a perfect mask of stunned confusion. I stood too, tears streaming down my face, my sore hands clapping until they were numb, creating a sound that was all for him. In that moment, he wasn't the scholarship boy. He wasn't the janitor's son. He was an artist. He was seen. When the applause finally subsided, fading like the tide going out, Leo just stood at the edge of the stage, blinking under the lights. He looked over at Mr. Croft and gave him a small, sincere smile. That was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. In that moment, he wasn't the poor girl's son anymore. He was a musician, an artist. He was seen. As he walked off the stage, the other kids, the ones in their glittering costumes, parted to let him pass, their eyes wide with a newfound respect. Parents who had never given us a second glance were now pointing, whispering his name. He ignored them all and ran straight into my arms. I stumbled back a step, wrapping him in a hug so tight, it was a wonder he could breathe. You did it, was all I could manage to say. My voice, a ragged whisper against his hair. Mommy. They listened. He whispered back into my chest. And that was when I finally let myself break, my tears soaking into the shoulder of his crisp, second-hand shirt. A moment later, Mr. Croft approached us, his smile gentle. He didn't address me first. He knelt slightly to be on Leo's level. That final line, he said, his voice soft with genuine curiosity. The one about your own reflection. Where did that come from, Leo? Who usually shied away from adults. Looked him right in the eye. Sometimes, he said quietly, when I look in the mirror, I wonder if I'm seeing me, or just the ghost of the person who gave me my face. Mr. Croft nodded slowly, a profound understanding passing between the old poet and the young one. He then stood and turned to me, holding out his hand. "Elar avance," I said, my voice still shaky as I shook it. Thank you. I have never seen anyone stand up for my son like that. He gave my hand a firm, reassuring squeeze. "Your son has an extraordinary gift," he said, "one I don't see often." That was more than just talent, that was truth. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a simple, elegant business card. "I work with a youth arts foundation in the city. They offer mentorships for gifted young writers. I want to connect him with them. He won't have to audition. I've already heard everything I need to." I stared at the card, the embossed letters feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. The reality of our life came crashing back. "Mr. Croft," I started, the words tasting like ash. "He's never had a formal lesson. We can't afford a program like that." He held up a hand, stopping me. "Talent like his isn't a commodity." "Madam," he said, his eyes kind but firm, "it's a resource, and it is our duty to nurture it, not price it. There will be no cost." Leo looked up at me, his eyes asking a question I had never been able to answer before. I nodded, a fresh wave of tears blurring my vision. "Say thank you, baby," I whispered. "Thank you," Leo said, his voice small but steady. 5 months have passed since the night my son changed everything by doing nothing more than being exactly who he is. We still live in the same small apartment. I still work my 2 jobs, and still smell like bleach by day and coffee by night. But the air we breathe feels different. The crushing weight of invisibility has lifted every Saturday. We wake before sunrise, and I drive him an hour into the city for his mentorship sessions at the foundation. We listen to music in our old car, act him with his face pressed to the window, watching the world wake up. He's not the same boy who stepped onto that stage. He talks now about iambic pentameter and the power of a well-placed metaphor. He reads his new work to me on the drive home, his voice no longer trembling but ringing with a quiet confidence. His teachers say he has a wisdom beyond his years. He still plays with the first piece sometimes, the one about the broken plate moon. But now he plays it differently. It's not louder, just fuller, like he owns every note. And he does. Something changed in me, too. For years, I thought my only job was to protect him, to build a shield around him made of my love and hard work, to keep the world's judgment from piercing his soft heart. But I was wrong. On that night, paralyzed in my seat, I couldn't protect him from that silence. What he needed wasn't my shield. He needed permission. Permission to be heard, to take up space, to believe in the sound of his own voice, even if the room stayed silent. I almost let that moment of silence define him. But one stranger, one person who chose to pay attention, made sure that didn't happen. And that's the part that stays with me. It wasn't a miracle or a stroke of luck. It was a decision. Dr. Monroe didn't just hear his music, he recognized it. And then he acted. Not to rescue, but to amplify. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to listen deeply. To step forward when everyone else stays seated. To remind a child, you are not invisible. That night gave my son the belief that he is worthy of being seen. And it reminded me that our story doesn't end with other people's silence. That when no one claps, it doesn't mean you stop playing. You keep going. Because one day, someone might hear you. And that person might be the reason everything changes. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a time you felt overlooked or finally seen, I hope you'll let it be a spark. Like the video to let us know it touched you. And share it with someone who might need a reminder that their quiet voice has power. In the comments below, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me about the person who stood up for you, or the moment you found the courage to stand up for yourself. I read every one. And if you want more stories that find the extraordinary in the ordinary, that speak to the heart, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And most of all, thank you for listening.